Hello and welcome to week 4 of the 52-week project. This week's theme is motion blur. Motion blur is an artistic way to capture the world around you, and typically as photographers we tend to avoid creating blurred photographs and we don't want to take photos that are out of focus, but for this theme we want to encourage you to break the rules, to leave your comfort zone, and to try something new. So let's dive into motion blur, what it is, and how you can take amazing photographs of it wherever you are. Let's start with the definition of motion blur. As its name suggests, motion blur is blur that captures movements. These movements can be simple, they can be selective, and they can be very abstract. So we're going to dive into all of these kinds of motion blur and see which one works for you. To create motion blur, use a slow shutter speed. Your shutter speed should be slower than 1/60th of a second. As you can see, the slower your shutter speed, the brighter your photographs become. So to compensate for this, use a different aperture. The more narrow your aperture, the darker your photographs will appear, so this will balance everything out. Here I'm just experimenting with different kinds of aperture to see the level of blur that I want to create in my images. And another thing I'm going to do is intentionally move my camera as I press the shutter to see what kind of effect that will create. And that's really fun to work with. That can help you take atmospheric and surreal looking images, and we'll dive more into that later. For selective motion blur, you need a tripod, and a tripod will help you take photographs that are sharp with selective motion. So let's say you're shooting on the street and you want to take blurred photographs of people. If you place your camera on a tripod and you use specific settings, then the people in your shot will be blurred lines, and everything around them, the buildings, the road, will be sharp. So this is a really cool way to create selective blur in your photographs. General motion blur is really fun to work with, and all you need to do is press the shutter and move your camera intentionally as you take the photograph. So this will create a completely blurred photograph, and it will also help you create an interesting surreal and painterly feeling in your images. So I'm taking self-portraits here while intentionally moving either myself or my camera as I press the shutter, and the results are pretty interesting and very different to selective motion blur, as you can see. If you want to create selective blur in your home, I highly recommend using a fan. I'm using a mini fan here, but I experimented with different fans for this shoot. My goal was to create a photograph in which my face was sharp, but my hair was blurred. And so to do this, I needed to stay very still during the shoot and to blow my hair in different directions. You don't necessarily need to photograph yourself. Anything that can move is perfect for this exercise, and this is absolutely perfect for days when you can't go outside or when it's not too windy outside and you're running out of ideas. Use this exercise as an opportunity to appreciate the little things in your life, whether that's people walking on the street, the way the curtains move in your home, anything that stands out to you, and try to capture it in an abstract and painterly way. As I mentioned earlier, we typically avoid blur in photography, but let this exercise show you that even with blur, even when you break the rules, you can take stunning photographs with emotion and with depth. Now it's your turn to take blurred photographs of the world around you. Whether it's you moving in front of your camera or cars moving out on the street, go out and capture different kinds of movements. Have fun with this, do something that you typically do not do, and you might find some really interesting opportunities to take great photographs. Make sure to share your results with us in our community. There's a link to it in the description. Make sure to let us know what your experience was like, what you learned, and what you look forward to learning about in the future. See you next week.